Wu Zetian, the woman who outsmarted an entire empire. In over 4,000 years of Chinese imperial history, only one woman ever declared herself Emperor of China. Not Empress, not Regent, Emperor. Her name was Wu Zetian. To traditional historians, she was a ruthless monster who built a secret police state. To others, she was a political genius. But what makes Wu Zetian truly terrifying is not just that she gained power in a world built entirely by and for men. It is how she outsmarted the entire empire to get it. She did not launch a bloody military coup. She played a high-stakes psychological game where she was always 10 steps ahead. She studied the rules of the patriarchal system so deeply that she knew exactly how to weaponize them against the men who wrote them. By the time China's ruling elite realized they were being manipulated, Wu Zetian had already rewritten the rules of the empire itself. The girl who entered the imperial palace, Wu Zetian, was born in 624 AD into wealth, but her greatest asset was her education. Unlike other girls taught only to sow and obey, Wu mastered history, politics, and military strategy. She didn't view the imperial court as a fairy tale. She saw it as a grand chessboard. At age 14, she entered the palace as a low-ranking concubine to Emperor Taizong. In a harem of thousands, most women relied on beauty or submissiveness. Wu relied on calculation. She observed how ministers formed factions, how the emperor made decisions, and where the fractures in the empire's power structure lay. When Emperor Taizong died in 649 AD, tradition dictated a brutal end for childless concubines. Their heads were shaved, and they were sent to waste away in a Buddhist convent. The system was designed to erase them, but Wu had already made her move. Before Taizong's death, she had quietly captured the heart of his son, the crown prince Li Ju, who would become Emperor Gaozong. The convent wasn't her prison. It was just a temporary pause on her chessboard. The return to power, the baby daughter death mystery. When the young Emperor Gaozong brought Wu back to the palace from the monastery, it was a major scandal. Taking his father's former concubine violated every moral code. But Wu knew Gaozong's weakness. He was insecure, easily controlled, and deeply infatuated with her. However, returning was only step one. The imperial harem was a deadly psychological war zone, and Wu was at the very bottom of the food chain. Standing between her and absolute safety were two powerful women, Empress Wang, the aristocratic, cold ruler of the inner palace, and consort Xiao, the emperor's current favorite. These two women represented the traditional elite. To them, Wu was just a vulgar, shaved-headed nun who had crawled her way back into the palace through sin. They wanted her destroyed. Wu quickly realized that conventional charm would not save her. In this court, if you were not the hunter, you were the prey. To survive, she needed to eliminate both rivals in one definitive strike. She didn't use poison or steel. Instead, she orchestrated *, the most calculated, cold-blooded psychological trap in Chinese history. In 654 AD, Wu gave birth to a baby daughter. In the brutal game of imperial politics, a daughter was less valuable than a son, but Wu saw the infant as something else. The ultimate weapon. A few days after the birth, Empress Wang visited Wu's quarters. She did what any empress was expected to do. She looked at the newborn, played with her for a few moments to show imperial grace, and then left. This was the exact micro-moment Wu had been waiting for. Not long after the empress departed, Wu returned to the room. A few moments later, the palace echoed with blood-curdling screams. The infant was dead, suffocated in her crib. When Emperor Gaozong rushed into the room, he found a scene of absolute devastation. Wu was not just weeping, she was putting on a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She tore at her clothes, convulsed with grief, and pointed her finger directly at the person who had last been in the room. Empress Wang. Gaozong was consumed by a blinding, protective rage. Empress Wang was brought forth, pale and trembling. She denied everything, but she had no alibi, no defense, and no way to combat the perfect narrative Wu had constructed. The Crimson Mystery. Did Empress Wang actually murder the baby out of jealousy, or did Wu Zetian smother her own flesh and blood to frame her rival? Modern historians still fiercely debate this moment. But if Wu did it, it was an act of terrifying, unmatched genius. She understood the patriarchal rules of the empire better than the men who wrote them. In a traditional society, an empress was not just a political figure. She was the mother of the empire, the ultimate symbol of virtue and maternal purity. By framing Wang for infanticide, the murder of a helpless newborn, Wu didn't just ruin a rival. She completely destroyed Wang's moral legitimacy. She stripped away the empress's armor of nobility. Gaozong completely turned against his wife. He no longer saw Wang as a noble empress. He saw her as a barren, cold-blooded monster, and he looked at Wu not as an ambitious threat, but as a grieving, shattered victim who desperately needed his protection. Wu used this massive wave of imperial guilt to reshape the entire court. She skillfully played the role of the tragic mourning mother while quietly consolidating power. She bought the loyalty of opportunistic ministers and spread rumors to isolate the Empress's allies. The elite officials fought back, arguing that an empress from a noble bloodline could not be deposed for a former nun. But Wu had already weaponized the emperor's emotions. Gaozong felt it was his duty to avenge his dead child. In 655 AD, the trap snapped shut. Empress Wang was stripped of her title, her family was exiled, and Wu Zetian was fictitiously crowned Empress of China. The horror did not stop there. Soon after her coronation, Wang and consort Xiao were thrown into a dark, forgotten prison cell. Rumors from the era claimed that Wu, wanting to ensure they could never crawl back to power, ordered their hands and feet cut off before throwing their living torsos into giant vats of wine, bitterly declaring, "Let these two witches get drunk to their very bones." Whether this specific horror is true or a fabrication by later historians, the political reality was undeniable. Asterisk, the chessboard had been cleared, and Wu Zetian had outsmarted them all. Asterisk, with the Empress crown on her head, and the Emperor entirely dependent on her, her true ascent to the throne had officially begun. With the Empress crown on her head, Wu took advantage of Gaozong's failing health. He suffered from chronic strokes and blindness, leaving a power vacuum. Wu filled it instantly. She did not forcefully seize the throne. She casually stepped into it. She sat behind a pearl and silk curtain directly behind the emperor during court meetings. Officials spoke to Gaozong, but the voice answering them from behind the curtain was Wu's. This unprecedented duo became known as the Two Saints. The elite male scholars hated her. To them, a woman ruling was an omen of destruction, a violation of the natural order. But Wu outsmarted them by creating a massive, terrifying network of secret police and informants. Anyone who whispered against her disappeared. A brutal official named Lai Junchen invented horrific torture devices just to extract confessions. Yet, while she terrified the nobility, she won the hearts of the people. She bypassed the corrupt aristocracy by expanding the civil service exams, allowing poor but brilliant scholars to gain high government positions. These new officials owed their careers entirely to Wu, effectively creating an army of loyal bureaucrats who displaced the old noble families. She stabilized the economy, cut taxes for farmers, and kept the borders secure. She proved she could run the empire better than any man before her. When Emperor Gaozong died in 63 AD, the men of the empire thought their nightmare was over. Wu's eldest son, Zhongzong, became emperor. But when he tried to give power to his wife's family, showing he wouldn't be his mother's puppet, Wu acted without hesitation. In less than 2 months, she marched into the throne room, stripped her own son of his title, and exiled him. She replaced him with her younger, more submissive son, Ruzong, keeping him under literal house arrest. Rebellions erupted. Imperial princes raised armies to save the empire from the female usurper. Wu crushed them with clinical precision. Her secret police hunted down every male relative of the royal family. Princes, dukes, and ministers vanished or were forced to commit suicide. But Wu realized that ruling from behind a puppet king would always invite rebellion. The system would always fight her because the system demanded a male emperor. So she decided on the ultimate move. She would not just control the system, she would break it. In 690 AD, Wu Zetian crossed the final, most dangerous boundary. She did not just step into the light, she shattered the very foundation of Eastern civilization. She declared the iconic Tang dynasty ended and announced the creation of a new empire, the Great Zhou dynasty. Then, she pulled off the ultimate coup. She crowned herself emperor. To understand how staggering this was, you must understand ancient China. Women could be empresses, regents, or queen mothers. They could hold power, but only as placeholders for a male heir. The title of emperor, however, was reserved exclusively for the Son of Heaven. It was a cosmic role, a bridge between the divine and the earth, built entirely on the absolute rule of men. For a woman to take that title was not just treason. It was viewed as a cosmic sin that would invite the wrath of heaven. But Wu Zetian didn't care about their traditions. She had spent decades outsmarting the court, and now she was ready to outsmart history itself. She knew that brute force alone wouldn't keep her on the throne. She needed to rewrite the collective mind of the empire. To do this, she launched the most sophisticated psychological and cultural propaganda campaign ever seen. First, she weaponized religion. Traditional political philosophy offered her no path to the throne. It actively condemned female rule. So, Wu turned to Buddhism, which was growing rapidly among the common people. She and her loyal monks cleverly discovered a forgotten text called the Great Cloud Sutra. This text contained a prophecy about a female deity who would reincarnate as a supreme female monarch to bring a golden age of peace, wealth, and an end to suffering to the world. Wu didn't just claim to be emperor, she declared herself the living embodiment of this prophecy. Next came the divine signs. Wu orchestrated a series of miracles across the country. Mysterious stones were conveniently discovered in rivers, beautifully carved with inscriptions like, "The Holy Mother has come to earth to rule mankind with eternal prosperity." To the illiterate masses, these weren't political tricks, they were commands from heaven. Her grandest psychological masterstroke was carved into stone. She poured vast imperial wealth into the Longmen grottos, commissioning a massive, breathtaking complex of Buddhist statues. The centerpiece was a giant 57-foot-tall cosmic Buddha. According to historical records, the face of this supreme Buddha was intentionally modeled after Wu Zetian's own facial features. By carving her likeness into the permanent stone of the mountains, she effectively merged her political identity with the divine. Every time a subject bowed to the Buddha, they were unconsciously bowing to her. She didn't stop at religion. She attacked the very language of the empire. Wu created over a dozen entirely new characters. One of the most famous was her own chosen name, Asterisk Zhao. She took the characters for sun and moon and placed them directly above the character for sky. The message was clear and unassailable. She was the cosmic light shining down from above, illuminating the entire universe. If you wanted to write or speak in her empire, you had to use her mind. The patriarchal elite were horrified, but they were completely paralyzed. The princes who tried to raise armies were instantly crushed by her generals. Her secret police monitored every corner of the capital. Ministers walked into court every morning not knowing if they would return home alive. Yet beneath the atmosphere of terror, her empire flourished. She kept the Silk Road open and secure, trade boomed, and China's military borders expanded deeper into Central Asia than ever before. She forced an entire continent of men to accept a reality they believed was impossible. For 15 glorious, bloody, and prosperous years, Wu Zetian ruled alone from the Dragon Throne. She had looked at a civilization built entirely to keep her in the shadows, and through sheer intellectual brilliance and iron will, she forced it to worship her as its ultimate god. But time is the one enemy no genius can outsmart. As Wu entered her late 70s, paranoia and old age began to cloud her sharp mind. She fell under the influence of the Zhang brothers, two handsome, young, and corrupt courtiers. The Zhang brothers exploited her vulnerability, controlling access to the aging emperor, and selling government positions for money. The court grew chaotic, and the bureaucracy Wu had spent decades perfecting began to fracture. In 705 AD, when Wu was over 80 years old and confined to her sickbed, the palace elite finally found their courage. A group of military generals and ministers launched a coup, killed the Zhang brothers, and forced Wu Zetian to abdicate the throne. Her exiled son, Zhongzong, was brought back, and the Tang dynasty was restored. Within months of losing her crown, the only female emperor of China died peacefully in her sleep. Wu Zetian was buried next to her husband at the Qianling Mausoleum, but her final statement to the world was her most mysterious masterpiece. While every other emperor filled their giant stone monuments with long poetic lists of their victories and achievements, Wu Zetian ordered her monument, the asterisk blank stela, to be left completely empty. No words, no titles, just a massive blank piece of stone. Historians have argued about it for over 1,000 years. Some say she believed her accomplishments were too grand for human words. Others believe she knew that biased historians would try to rewrite her history anyway. So she left the stone blank as if to say, write whatever lies you want. I still ruled your empire. For centuries, male historians did exactly that, portraying her as a sexual deviant, a cold murderer, and a witch. They condemned her for the Zetian assassinations, secret police tactics, and purges that male emperors used every single day. Her true crime in their eyes was not cruelty, it was her gender. Wu Zetian shattered the illusion of male supremacy. She rose from a teenage concubine, trapped in a golden cage, to become the most powerful human being in Asia. She didn't do it through luck. She did it through an unmatched understanding of power, strategy, and human psychology. She looked at an empire built entirely to keep women down, smiled, and turned it into her own personal chessboard. History tried for 1,000 years to turn her into a monster, because admitting she was a genius meant admitting that a woman could outsmart the entire world.